Thank you. That's wonderful. My name is Deborah Barber, but you can call me Debbie, and I'm part of its small but mighty leadership. Would our leadership team please raise their hands? We have other indivisible groups here too. We have, I think it's 5 in the San Luis Obispo County alone. So we are really building. But it is a movement of thousands of group leaders and more than 1 million members all over the country. It was founded to resist the rigging of our democracy, to favor only a few, and transform it back into what it was intended to be as framed by the Constitution: of, by, and for the people. The reason we're here today is because of all of you. Just a year ago, I was going through my own personal grieving process for an election that I thought was going to bring an exciting and much-needed new leadership for our country. Like many of you, I was afraid that the elected leadership was a potential death knell for our democracy and constitutional freedom that we have enjoyed for 250 years. Sadly, we've undergone such a radical change in just a year that many of us don't recognize who we are as a country anymore. Which brings me to all of you. I think you're here because you're part of the radical resistance. Because you're standing up for what you believe is right as an American. The only reason I'm still standing is because people like our speaker today, Robert Hubbell, has offered me and many others a way to think about things that have happened and get engaged in doing something about it. We are all still standing because multiple grassroots organizations, that is, we the people, have stood up and said no. The recent shooting of Renee Nicole Good clearly shows us who the criminals really are. Now we have to show them who we are. So I want you to look around you. This is your community. We are stronger together. This is a moment where we must have moral clarity. We must have courage. It's not okay for masked men to go door to door and take innocent lives. We are Americans, and fighting for freedom and democracy is who we are. Today, after Robert's talk, we will offer opportunities for you to be active and engaged. We invite you to come across the hallway here and join us. But now I want to introduce our esteemed speaker, Robert Hubbell. There are so many things that I could say about him, but he wanted me to say only that he's the author of today's edition newsletter on Substack. So he's going to speak briefly and then take questions.
Thank you, Debbie. Can everyone hear me in the back? Yes. Great. First of all, let me say I am humbled by this turnout. God bless you all for showing up. I'm only going to speak for about 15 minutes because I've learned through the resistance that 15 minutes is the new 30 minutes. What we need to do is to hear from you. So we will be taking questions. Some of you have written questions down. Our moderator will be coming to you, calling you by name, asking you to read your question, and then we'll engage in a dialogue. But before I begin, first of all, I want to thank the Unitarian Universalist Church congregation for opening its beautiful sanctuary to us. And let me say, I love their mission statement. We practice resistance. Resistance needs to be practiced. It is an ongoing act, and we need to do it every day. I also want to introduce my wife, Jill Bickett, who many of you know is the managing editor of the newsletter. My brother Joe and his wife Lynn. Joe, stand up. their son, my nephew, Tyler. They're longtime natives of San Luis Obispo, Pismo Beach, Grover Beach. You should be looking for them out on bridge overpasses and at protests. I'm very proud of them for their commitment. You know, frequently people go to talks and you tell your friends, oh, I went to a speech by this guy, Robert Hubbell, and he said yada, yada, yada. So I want you to remember the one thing when they say, what did Hubbell talk about? He said, thank you. Thank you, because you are the last line of defense of democracy, and if it were not for you, we would be in a fine mess. So I want you to look to your left and look to your right, look someone in the eye and say, thank you for being a patriot. And the reason that I come here to say thank you is because no one recognizes the incredible job that the resistance has done and is doing to save democracy. You are not in this for thanks, but it would be nice if today, after 3 million people showed up on the streets yesterday, the New York Times had one story in the entire newspaper. It does not. It thinks that what we are doing is somehow irrelevant when in fact we, the resistance, are the ones who are saving democracy. Congress has failed us. The Supreme Court has failed us. The media has failed us. Business leaders have failed us. Universities have failed us. Leading law firms have failed us. You know who hasn't failed us? You. You're the ones standing on bridge overpasses when it's cold and when it's hot and when you're the only one there and when you're there with 100 people because someone was executed in our streets. We still have a democracy because of you, not because of Congress, not because of the Supreme Court, not because of the tech billionaires. We still have a constitution because you have reached out of your comfort zone during a difficult time in our nation's history. None of you want to be doing this again. And yet, here we are. At one level, we have no choice. At another level, we are doing it for our children and our grandchildren and future citizens of America and immigrants who we will never know. And that is why when you stand out on a roadside by yourself or with 3 or 4 friends and it feels like, why does it matter? 2 or 3 weeks ago, I published a letter from a reader who said, you know, I'm out there every weekend and it feels like it doesn't matter. It does matter because you do not know the comfort and hope and inspiration that you inspire in the passersby who just kind of note it in their mind, you know what? Sharon hasn't given up. So I am not going to give up. We need people not to give up so they will show up in the midterms. So that the 4 million people who voted in 2020 but not 2024 will think that there's something to show up for. So what you are doing is you are inspiring other people by your actions. And you, as I say, will not know the lives that you have touched, but believe me, every day that you are out there, you are telling people, do not give up, do not surrender, because I have not given up. I have not surrendered. But I think that it is important for us to acknowledge how difficult this moment is. We have a president who has just stopped following the Constitution. He invaded Venezuela despite the War Powers Act. I hope this isn't true, but it appears that he's going to attack Iran in the coming week, even though the Senate has said, stop, enough. He doesn't care about the Constitution, and things that he has done have become commonplace. On the first day of his administration, He violated the the Impoundment Control Act by simply refusing to spend money that Congress had ordered him to spend. That is a felony, which he's immune from because of John Roberts. But it is the way that our Constitution works. Congress appropriates money, the president spends it. And he says, no, I don't think so. I'm going to decide all over again, despite what Congress decided to do, I'm going to decide how that money should be spent. But that's just one of the ways in which he has violated the Constitution. He is shutting down the Department of Education, an agency created by Congress. He has no authority to do it. And he's figured out that all he has to do is just fire everybody, and then he doesn't have to abolish it. He's torn down the East Wing of the White House. How many of you know that he is going to add a second story to the West Wing? How many of you know that he is going to change the National Mall to include Baroque statues in the reflecting pool? He is doing these things even though they are illegal. And somehow, some way, the press has accepted them. Our elected officials in Congress have accepted them. Sure, they go on MSNBC. They go to their committee meetings. They need to be taking over the floor of the Senate and the House and shutting down business and saying, we will not allow anything to occur until this president begins to follow the Constitution. Well, they're not doing that, so you're doing that. Now, I'm here today preaching to the choir, literally. And I frequently get criticisms from readers on my newsletter saying, you know, oh great, it's fine that you give these messages, but you're just talking to the people who already believe the way you do. Well, in some sense, that is true. But you're the only audience I have. And you know people. You know people who are this close to thinking, you know, maybe I really should kind of go to that postcard meeting. And you know, I mean, Danielle is always talking about this group, Indivisible. You know, what is she, some kind of, what is it, a cult, you know? I mean, by the way, Indivisible is the North Star of the resistance. God bless Indivisible. You know people, and we are at a moment of crisis in our country where we have to have the uncomfortable conversations with people in our lives and say, I am going out to stand on a freeway overpass, to protest along the roadside somewhere, to write postcards, and you're coming with me. And I don't care if you don't do anything, just stand by my side and just watch me. Is that Gail Robillard? No, okay. Looks exactly like a friend of ours. I was going to say, you drove all the way from Los Angeles. We need to get people to join us. Why? Because when enough of us say no, this will stop. So now what we know is 3 million people went out on Saturday, 3 million people are going to go out on Sunday. That's not enough people. We need more. That's where you come in. Many of you have heard of the 3% rule. It's a paper by a Harvard professor who studied resistance movements across the country. And what she's found is that when 3% of the people rise up against a regime, that is enough to topple that regime or to stop the anti-democratic practices of the regime. So here is the deal. That's wonderful. 3% of America is 9 million, 10 million people. Forget the 3% rule. We need the 30% rule. We need 100 million Americans out in the streets, not just after someone is executed in broad daylight, not just after we invade Venezuela, not just after we launch an attack on Iran to take out its leader. We need 100 million people in the streets every weekend, and if that doesn't work, then every day. And you know what? It will stop. The other thing that readers say to me is Donald Trump doesn't care. You're right, he doesn't care. But the people who support him do care. They are cowards, and little men and little women have sold their souls and their integrity because they're frightened by him. They need to be more frightened of the political movement of what Indivisible and the resistance movement represents than they are of that bully. And once we pass that line, then it will stop. And where is that line? Is it 10 million people? Is it 20 million people? I don't know. We just need to keep bringing people with us until we hit that number. And at that point, it will stop. And frankly, it may take a national strike. It may take us shutting down the economy in a peaceful way. So, if we can shut down the economy, then all of these billionaires and millionaires who are supporting Trump and thinking, this is really great. It's just $1 million for a pardon. I mean, that's pocket change to me. But if all of a sudden they realize no one will go to your gas station, no one will go to your Walmart, no one will go to your hotel chain because you're putting up ICE agents, they will pay attention really quickly. If you change their profit margin by 5%, that is a catastrophe. If you shut down their revenue for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, all of a sudden they'll think, oh my gosh, this is right. We the people are the governed, who give their consent to the government. It's right there in the first lines of the Declaration of the Independence. It says that the government is derived from us, and it is time for us to reclaim our agency, our power, as our source of the government. We have given our consent for this government to exist. It is time for us to withdraw it by showing up in the streets by the tens or the hundreds of millions. Now, I want you to know, and these are my closing remarks, and the last words I will say are thank you, because when somebody says, what did Hubble talk about? He said, thank you to me for being a member of the resistance. When future historians write about this moment in history, they will see, with the benefit of hindsight, that democracy was saved by everyday citizens who decided to resist, who decided to say enough is enough, who stepped outside their comfort zone, who asked their friend or neighbor to join them on the front lines of democracy. And they saved democracy, not Congress, not the elites, not the billionaires, not the Supreme Court. The people saved democracy. I know you will succeed because I know you are not going to quit. I know you are not going to surrender. And for that, I say thank you.
Can you hear me? Are we good?
Can I have the water?
How are we doing now, folks? Great. My name is Taylor Young. I'm with Indivisible SLO County. I'd like you all to just really quickly give yourselves a round of applause because we already have a bunch of questions. And this has been really an amazing turnout. And when Debbie introduced the leadership team, half of the leadership team were in the social hall setting up the second half of this event. So anyways, there are a bunch more of us here. But I wanted to give the majority of time for questions because that's the way Robert likes to run these things. I am going to be the question moderator. And so since we have so many people here, it's such a great turnout, and it's very crowded, we're going to have to do this in a particular way. So can you all agree with me now before I tell you what we're going to do? Can everyone nod your head that this is what we're going to do? Okay, good. So what I'm going to do is I am going to read out the names of 5 people who've asked questions and the area of the questions that they've asked in. I would like you to please make your way to the closest aisle to you. Because when I'm going to walk to you so that everyone can hear your question, and I am going to hold the microphone for you. This is the way it works, folks. I know you want to grab the microphone. I know some of you will. I'm going to wrestle it back. Okay? Nod your heads, okay? Great. So that's the way we got to work it. If you had a question and you've written it down while Robert was speaking, or if it comes up while somebody else is asking a question, just raise your hand with a piece of paper and the lovely Dawn will come and pick up your questions and she'll bring them up here, okay? What we're doing is we're pre-reviewing these questions a little bit just to make sure that we can get the majority of areas covered. So I can tell you we have many people who've asked us questions on the same area. So I'm just picking a question on that area. If we get to the end and your question still hasn't been answered, I will give it to you. Last thing, I apologize, Robert. What I'm going to do is when I come for you to ask your question, I'm going to give you your question back so you can read that question, because that's the question you get to ask. Okay? All right.
I think he was a school teacher.
All right. Mary, as did several other people, Mary Blacker had a question about elections. So, Mary, if you can move your way to the aisle, we'll get you in 1 second. Cynthia, as did some other people, had a question about the Supreme Court. Cynthia, if you can make your way to the aisle, that's great. I'm going to get my exercise today. Barb had a question about congressional oversight of ICE and DHS. Beautiful. Thank you very much. Julie had a question about Venezuela oil, as did a couple of other folks. Perfect. Great. If you can make your way to the aisle, that'd be great. And then I will call on the rest of the folks after we get through those. How does that sound, everybody? Awesome. You guys are great.
Can we start with the elections question first? And while we're doing this, I brought with me some today's edition swag. It's in the back. There's a box full of pens. I mean, you know, it's that's how we roll. But feel free to take one each and, you know, show it off to your friends.
So this is like the judging at those dog shows. I'll take them in elections, Supreme Court. I'm doing it in that order. Mary, you had elections. Here's your question. Let me put the microphone.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
My question is, what gives you hope that the upcoming midterm elections will be free and fair?
That's a really terrific question. I hear it all the time, but frequently I hear it as, oh, there aren't going to be 2026 midterms. Please do not say that. Do not normalize the notion that somehow the 2026 midterms are not going to take place. They are going to take place, and there are a couple of reasons structurally that they must take place. Because if you think about what not having elections, let's just start there, not having elections means, it means that every member of the House, their term ends on January 3rd, 2027. There will be no House of Representatives if we don't have an election. And 1/3 of the US senators will term out, leaving a Senate that has a majority Democratic Party. How many people think that will happen? That's not going to happen. Moreover, when we think about elections, we think that there is this federal election and then there are, state elections. No, there are elections, and they are run by the states and by counties and by cities. Now, the numbers get rolled up and then, they're reported out on the federal level. But the states are in charge of federal elections, and guess what the president's role is in federal elections? 0. Guess what the federal government's role is in federal elections? 0. So, are some states going to not hold elections? If Mississippi doesn't want to send representatives to Congress, bad on them. But California is going to do that. And if California is going to do it, then I'm pretty certain that all the red states will do it too. So there are these structural imperatives for people to have elections. Now, but the question that you asked is whether it would be free and fair. Okay, that's a harder question because we live in an age of disinformation where people are saying things that are just flatly contrary to the Constitution and to the evidence. Well, that's where we come in again. There are organizations like Indivisible, like Mark Elias's law firm, like the Brennan Center for Justice, that are litigating these election cases every day. And you know what? They win 95% of the time. And if you want some sort of proof of concept about how it's going to happen and whether it will be free and fair, look to what happened on November 4th, 2025. We had a bunch of, sort of special elections and federal elections for off years and that kind of thing. And Donald Trump and the Republican Party, they were getting ready to say those elections were rigged. And they didn't. And why didn't they? Anybody? Because the margins were so big on November 4th, 2025, just a month ago, was so big that there was no way for them to say, oh, it was rigged and we'll challenge it in court and we'll just ask Georgia for 1,178 votes. So that's the key. If we want free and fair elections, then let's not win those elections by 40 votes. Let's win them by 20,000 votes, and then there's nothing they can do. And you know what? And I know people get upset when I'm hopeful about this. We are going to win those elections by 20,000 votes. There are 4 major voting blocks, and this is where my wife should be going like this because I'm going on too far. There are 4 major voting blocks in America. The smallest is the Republican Party. The next largest is the Democratic Party. The next largest are independents or no party affiliation. And the next largest is did not vote. 90 million people. Okay. The fact of the matter is that the next election will be decided by persuadable independents and did not vote. Okay? That's something we can control. We can get people to the polls, and if we do that and we win by healthy margins, we are going to have not only free and fair elections, we're going to have incontestable elections. So that's my answer.
All right, this is Cynthia, who has a question about the Supreme Court, as did a few others, so you could be expansive in your answer. Oh, wait, I shouldn't have said that. You're a lawyer.
No. It's okay. Please be expansive. My honor is to ask you this question. Could you talk more in detail, about how you envision restructuring the Supreme Court post-Trump?
Okay, that's a great question. First of all, let me just say we are in this mess because of the Supreme Court, full stop. If the Supreme Court had adhered to the law and enforced the Constitution, we would not be here. Donald Trump would be in jail. It's that simple. Now, there are lots of ways to rehabilitate the Supreme Court. The problem that we face right now is that there is a 5 or 6 member reactionary majority which is just doing whatever Donald Trump wants them to do. And the question is, how can we counteract that? Now, people come up with all sorts of complicated, term limits that alternate with each president, or you impose term limits on the existing justices, or just all sorts of different things, 2 different Supreme Courts. Those are all swell ideas. They all require a constitutional amendment, which would require passage in 2/3 of both houses and approval by 38 states. That will never happen. Okay? Now, the size of the Supreme Court is set by statute. The current size of the Supreme Court is set by a statute which is passed through Congress by a majority in both houses. It's subject to the filibuster in the Senate. Let's kill the filibuster. Now, here's a surprise. The filibuster requires 60 votes for a bill to make it to the floor for a vote in the Senate. How many votes does it take to kill the filibuster entirely? 51. It's nuts. We can stop the filibuster today. Now, so we pass a law in 2028, that says the Supreme Court is larger than it presently is, and I'm going to propose a number. Whatever that number is, it is large enough to swamp the reactionary majority. And then the new Supreme Court says, oh, you know what? We're going to reconsider Citizens United. We're going to reconsider Heller, which is the decision that said everyone has an individual right to own a weapon of war. We're going to reconsider Dobbs. We're going to reconsider, all sorts of cases that basically gave power to the. Oh, we're going to reconsider Trump v. U.S., which is the immunity decision. And that's all it takes to reclaim our democracy. Put in a Supreme Court that will adhere to the Constitution. Now, here's the part where I lose people, but I have an argument. How big should the Supreme Court be? My answer is 27. Why? I agree with you. That's way too small. And let me explain my thought. In 1789, there were 4 million people in America, and we had 6 justices on the Supreme Court. Roll forward today, we have order of magnitude 100 times as many people. We've added 3 justices to the Supreme Court, okay? There is a case to be made in the world's largest economy that exists because we have free and fair markets that are mostly free of corruption, that rely on regulation, that we should have a very large Supreme Court with hundreds of justices. Many other countries do, but okay, that sounds too extreme. Anybody know how large the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is in which we sit? 27. Has all work stopped on the Ninth Circuit? No. It operates, and it has operated at that level for decades. Perfectly easily. The Supreme Court could do the same thing. Now, I think there's a really principled, logical reason for saying it should be 27 or something in that range. And they should all be appointed by the next president, who will be a Democratic president, so all of those people can overwhelm them. But if we can do that, it's a clumsy, kludgy way to come at this. And I agree it's not the perfect way. But it is a way that simply requires passage in both houses of Congress and the signature of the president. And then here's the sort of, I didn't say this, but the evil genius of 27. Let's suppose that at some point in the future Republicans have a trifecta. They won't. But let's assume that they have a trifecta. How many justices would they have to appoint in order to dilute a 27-member Supreme Court? It's somewhere in the 60s. And at that point, I think people might say, you know what? Maybe we really should reform the Supreme Court through constitutional amendments, enough of each side expanding it. And the one argument I cannot abide is when people say, oh, if you expand the Supreme Court, then they'll do X, Y, Z. Let them. If we don't act because we're afraid of what they will do, we will never act.
Barb has a question about congressional oversight and funding of DHS.
And I almost feel like I know the answer, but what can Congress do to force ICE to stop their unlawful and violent acts? Because we're coming up to funding, and I'm not supposed to elaborate, but I'm a little bit. I was listening to Senator Chris Murphy this morning, and he was talking about ways that Congress can use funding to try to address what's going on right now.
Right, okay. That's a great question. And again, I think we need to look a little bit about the structural ways that we can approach this. So first of all, does the United States of America currently have a budget as required by the Constitution? No. We have something known as a continuing resolution that says that whatever we spent last year we'll spend, in the coming year. And back in September, when the Democrats in the Senate said, okay, we're going to do a government shutdown unless you increase or sustain subsidies for the ACA, they fought and they fought and they fought, and then 8 senators or 7 Democratic senators and 1 independent, Angus King, collapsed, capitulated, and surrendered, and showed them that, Democrats always chicken out. So that's a hard problem. But does anybody know when the current continuing resolution expires? January 30th. What should Democrats do? Shut down the government. Say, you know what? Look, if you are going to create a secret police that can, with, according to the vice president, absolute immunity, execute people in the streets, why should we fund that government? If I were in the Senate or in the House, I'd say, here's my position. We'll keep the government shut down until you abolish ICE and DHS. We do not need them. When was DHS created? Right after 2000, after the terrorist attack on 2001. It is a recent creation, which at the time was controversial because as it was originally created, it gave the Department of Homeland Security all sorts of powers that most people say, yeah, are probably unconstitutional. But we've just let it go on. We don't need it. Get rid of it. We have dozens of intelligence agencies. We have the Border Patrol. We have lots of agencies that can do what DHS and ICE do. We don't need them. Abolish them. That's what I would do. I would shut down the government and say, we'll reopen the government when you cut all funding to those organizations. Now, that's not realistic. That's not realistic. But maybe it's realistic to cut their budgets by 25%, by 50%, by requiring that they all wear body cameras, by requiring and that they not wear masks. We have leverage if we have the nerve to say, not one more penny will be spent until you start complying with the Constitution.
Okay. I remembered your name, Julie. I'm sorry, Julie's outed me. My brain went somewhere because after Julie speaks, I got to put the rest of the people out. So I wanted to quickly say, Karen, who had a question about the younger generation, if you can make your way to an aisle. You're on an aisle. You can keep sitting down. I'll just come find you. And then there's some guy named Tyler Hubbell who has a question. Nepotism is alive and well because this came in really late. There's also a guy named Joe Hubbell has a question. That's private, dude. Just ask your brother. And then after that, we've got Patrick has a question, which is somewhat related to Tyler's question, but we're going to let him ask that too. Oops. And then I just did that, folks. So it's going to be fun after that. All right, Julie, go ahead and ask your question, dear. I've got this.
Okay, this is about Venezuela oil. With the low price of a barrel of oil, what is the rationale for oil companies to get involved and to bail out what he's talking about doing?
So this is a great question. The question is, look, the whole invasion of Venezuela was about the oil because now we are reinstituting the government of Maduro by recognizing Delcy Rodriguez, who was Maduro's vice president, who, by the way, several years ago, the military kicked out of office because they said she was too extreme. So that's now who's running Venezuela. And if it was about taking over oil, you should know that the Venezuelan oil fields have been moribund and that it's a particular type of oil which is very viscous. And it needs naphtha, I think, which comes from, guess where? Russia. So the notion that you are going to entice U.S. oil companies to go in and to rehabilitate these rusting oil fields so that you can get this really thick crude, which is not really meant, and to Trump's credit, he said this the other day, it really doesn't make gasoline, it makes tar for roads. So that we can get this stuff and get Chevron and Exxon and everyone else to go in and do it so that they can maybe earn 4 cents at the pump 10 years from now? They're not going to do it. And maybe I'll republish this. Like a week ago, I published a link to an article in The Economist. It's free. It's accessible to everyone. If you read that, you will be convinced to a moral certainty it is impossible. It will never happen that U.S. companies will go in to develop Venezuelan oil unless and until they're effectively put in charge of Venezuela and it becomes a banana republic, which, by the way, is not a slur on the country. It is a slur on the American companies that go in and for profit take over the democratic governments in these areas. So there is no rationale for taking over Venezuela for oil. And that is, look, we have to believe what Trump says now. He's going to attack Iran, try to take out the Ayatollah this week, not because he wants democracy for the Iranian people. He wants their oil. I mean, it's that simple. And as I say, it is unfathomable to me that when our government, when our president is disregarding the Constitution, using the U.S. military as his personal plaything, that we'll say, oh yeah, let's go ahead and we'll enter into another continuing resolution and we'll fund the military so that they can go off and do all sorts of things that are illegal. That's just complete and utter nonsense. And I would have used another word, but we're in a church. Also, I just want to say, my brother Joe has been like a brother to me. So, okay. I really am, I don't want to, it's kind of an embarrassing question to ask, but you know what, we're among friends. This is being recorded, but my brother Joe asks about our family dynamics, which were a little weird. And he says, was I really adopted? Show of hands. Come here, Joe.
Karen. Hi, Karen. I'm doing well. How are you?
You too. I wanted to ask, how do we motivate young people to show up and engage in democracy, such as saving our country?
So that's a really, really good question. God bless the young people who are here today, including Tyler. I want to talk about that. I want to come around to it this way. I frequently publish photos of my meetings with readers and protests, and people will say in the comments and in emails back to me, they're all old white people who are out there. To which I say, you're welcome. Yes, they are out there again. And there is no shame, there is nothing wrong with that in this moment. Look, it is harder than ever to be a young person in this economy. If you are trying to buy a home or hold down 2 jobs or raise a family, I'm sorry, it is just more difficult than when Joe and Jill and I and Lynn were. It just is. We could have a long discussion about why that is. And many of them are taking care of elderly parents, or they're wrestling with student loan debt. And then you say to them, take off every Tuesday at 10 a.m. and go protest on a bridge. And it's like, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm working my second shift of the day at that point in time. So I do not blame anyone for not being there, but I don't think we should blame the people who are showing up. I mean, they're the answer, are they not? They're not the problem. Jill and I have, as I frequently say, we've been kicked out of several Catholic parishes. But in the last one, before we were kicked out of it, we had and we had a great Irish priest, and he isn't the one who kicked us out. We had a new priest come in, and he fired me on the spot. I was the head of the finance council. I wanted to do silly things like count the money and report to the parishioners about what was going on. But this parish priest, one of the things that he said, and it was not original to him, I should look up to see who it was, but one of his sermons concluded with the lines, preach the gospel at all times, use words when necessary. And to your question, what I would say the most important thing you can do is to model the behavior that you want other people to follow. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And guess what? You're doing that. Jill and I have a very good friend, a couple who, I'm probably voted for Trump. We've never had that conversation. May have supported him, two out of 3 times. And they became disillusioned with his policies. And the woman reached out to Jill and started asking questions about, you're talking about going to these No King's Day protests, and what's it like? And, what if I were to go there? Would people look at me, in a funny way? And so Jill encouraged her to go to a protest. And now she's out there every week at some protest because Jill modeled behavior that one of her friends saw as something that she could do. And that's what we all have to do. And one of the difficult parts of this moment is we're all walking around like Linus, which is an ancient reference to the Charlie Brown cartoon. We'll explain it to you later, Tyler. No, it wasn't Linus. Who walked around with a cloud over his head the whole time? Pigpen, right? We all walk around with this cloud over our head thinking, oh my God, we lost really big in 2024 and it's horrible and, we're coming back from this disaster. No, we're not. But for 300,000 votes in 3 swing states, Kamala Harris would be president. We came that close. We lost because 4 million people stayed home in 2024 who voted in 2020. Now, we all have our reasons why we think that might be true. My personal belief is that America was not ready to elect a black Asian woman as president. Yeah, or any woman at all. I mean, the 2 times Trump has won, who has he won against? Women. The 1 time he lost, who did he lose against? A man. And I wish it were not that way. I wish it were not that way. But I think if we're going to be honest with ourselves about what we need to do, we need to be honest about why Kamala probably lost. And it probably had to do with the systemic racism in America. In 2010, the Democrats lost how many seats in the House? 60. They lost 60 seats in the House. How many did they lose in 2010 in the Senate? 11. They went from a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate and from a 60-seat majority in the House. Why did that happen? Obama won in 2008. That was one of the that was a continental shift in the understructure of the earth to have that big of a switch in 1 year, and it was because we had the audacity to elect a black man as president. Now, that feels bad, but let me also say that the reason that Donald Trump won is because he carried persuadable independents by about 5 or 6, 7 points. He's lost them by 15 points. So if we can't win having taken that advantage back, we don't deserve to win. All we need to do is to get 4 million people back to the polls, and we will have a landslide victory in 2026 and 2028. Now, don't go tell your friends, oh, Hubble said we're going to win, because as soon as you do that, they'll write me a nasty letter. And I'm sorry, guys, it's always men who said, oh, you're such a you-know-what. You got to scare people. No, we have to give them hope. We have to give them a reason to show up. And the reason for them to show up is we almost won in 2024, and you saved democracy in 2018. Remember that? And remember when you saved it in 2020 and 2022? Okay, we came that close in 2024. We're going to do it in 2026. We're going to do it in 2028. So let's stop walking around with a cloud over our heads like things are horrible. Donald Trump is horrible, but we're in control. So.
That's great. Tyler, I'm going to give you your question. Wait 1 second, because I want to tell everybody else. Patrick, you're out. Sorry, we don't have time. I want to get to some other things. Do we have? Kathleen had a question about taxes. Kathleen, not Texas, taxes. Okay, you're going to be up next after Tyler. It's 3 people have asked the same question that Kathleen had, so I want to make
All
sure
right,
it
I'm going
gets
to keep
answered.
my answers very short
Yeah,
because we have 6
I think that
minutes.
one could be short. And then we have Allie Jones. Okay, good. Allie, we're going to do your question after that, and then we'll probably be wrapping it up after that.
Yep,
So
okay.
Tyler, go ahead.
So this kind of goes to how do we motivate young people? It's in a similar vein, and it has to do with the DNC and David Hogg being somewhat elbowed out of the DNC. And what are your thoughts about running primary candidates against Democratic candidates?
We should do it all the time. I mean, look, the current crop, and by the way, that's Indivisible's position, right? At least with respect to the Senate. I don't know what it is with respect to the House. But let me say this. You couldn't do a worse job than the current Democratic caucus in the Senate and the House is doing. Every one of them need to be held accountable. Now, I think the way elections work, most of them will win. But you know what? If we start to run people like Tyler against them, they'll pay attention. They'll think, well, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't take it for granted that I've been in Congress or in the House for 30 years and I'm going to be there for 32. We need to challenge them. And I think particularly that some of the support for the awful nominees that Trump has put in, the continued support of votes for the judges that they're putting in, mean that we ought to be challenging Democrats to be better. When Ken Martin took over the DNC, there was a fight between a grassroots candidate and the establishment candidate, and the establishment candidate won and promised that you all and I were going to have a seat at the table. I prayed that Ken Martin's first email to Democrats would not ask for money. How many got that email? And you know what it asked for? Money. Instead of saying, we are in a crisis and I want you to follow me because I am going to lead us to victory.
Okay, Kathleen has a question. No, she doesn't. She has it. Oh, yeah, she does. Here's the right one. I'm sorry, I was organizing, my friend.
Oh, there we are.
That's your question.
Yes. All right.
3 other people have this question.
Do we really need to continue to send money, our hard-earned dollars, to the federal government, and particularly from California? We're a big powerhouse economically.
So I get this question all the time. Effectively, what it's asking is, should we have a tax strike? Everyone should follow the law. Let me just say that. I want to make an observation about other countries, not about the United States of America, not about whether you pay taxes or not. When people in other countries don't pay their taxes, the government pays attention real quick. I don't think we are there. I'm urging everyone to follow the law. I think we need a general national strike before that, because the people who are propping up Donald Trump care about their bottom lines. You are their bottom lines. You shop at their stores, you purchase their software, you buy their computers, you invest in their companies, and as soon as you say, I'm not going to do that anymore, all of a sudden they'll think that this cannot go on. So, all right, here we go. Last question.
All right, hold on. Sorry, I just tried to squat to get out of the way, and it turns out I'm old.
Still?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So we have a question about community organizing, but we had several other questions sort of in the same vein. So I'm going to expand it just a little bit, even though you're answering short. So there were questions about what's the best message that we can send to Congress. There's questions about how do we be nonviolent. And there were questions about how does a blue state influence red states.
Okay, well, so my question is mainly, many of us are new to community organizing, and it seems like there are people out there that are really good at it, and that some of us need some help learning those skills. And I know a lot of people in this room are already good at it, but for somebody that's new to that, do you have any recommendations on things that we can do, tactics, resources, things like that?
Yes. The most important thing you can do is join in community with others. And it's particularly important now for the reason that you indicate. We're all new at this. I mean, 8 years ago, I was a securities lawyer who had never been engaged actively in politics at all. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here in this moment, but now I consider it my duty. You want to do something, you're going to have to rely on others to help you. Indivisible is an incredible organization because it brings people together. There was an Indivisible call on Thursday, I think. They had 35,000 people on that call on Thursday, and now we have millions of people in the streets on Saturday and Sunday. There are other great groups, Swing Left, Sister District. I could go on, but you should also think about supporting local groups. County Democratic organizations, they need your support. Why? Because they support the local candidates who then go on to the state legislature, who then go on to the ladder, who then go on to Congress. We need the county Democratic organizations to identify talent and to bring them forward. So despite my comments about the corporate Democratic Party, the people who are working at the Democratic level, at the county level, and the state level are doing God's work. So join in community, be with others, but also don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to strike out on your own. I published a story 2 months ago about a woman who was living in a nursing home, a nursing facility. She was wheelchair bound. And so every day, she had someone from the nursing facility roll her out in the front of the facility on the roadside. And she stood out there with a sign, by herself. That's not the end of the story. Guess what happened? A bunch of people joined her. And I forget, it's Marjorie, is that her name? Now there's like Marjorie Mondays where everybody goes out and there's a big group because she did something. And it's not all on your shoulders to start a new group and to replicate Indivisible. It's not all on your shoulders to fund every group. All you need to do is something. If enough of us do something, that will be enough. That will be enough because the fact of the matter is most of us do nothing. So if we can urge more people, if we can motivate more people to do what you're doing by leading by example, then we will be out of this mess very quickly. We'll be out of it before the midterms if we can get enough people to show up. So I'm going to end where I began, which is thank you all for everything you're doing. Keep up the good work. As long as we do not quit, we do not surrender, we will win.
Thank you, Robert, and thank you to each one of you. And now I invite you to join us across the hall for refreshments and taking action. We did have a poem, but we don't have enough time to read it. I'm so sorry, Saray. Yeah. Do you want to talk to people about it afterwards? What do you all think? Okay. We're gonna give her the remote mic.
This ends on a spiritual higher level where we have to go. We can't just stay in the negative, and Robert's so good at that. For Renee Nicole Good, killed by ICE on January 7th, 2026 by Amanda Gorman. They say she is no more, that there her absence roars, blood blown like a rose. Iced wheels flinched and froze. Now, bare riot of candles, dark fury of flowers, pure howling of hymns. If for us she arose, somewhere in the pitch deep of our grief crouches our power. The howl where we begin. Straining upon the edge of the crooked crater of the worst of what we've been. Change is only possible, and all the greater, when the labor and bitter anger of our neighbors is moved by the love and better angels of our nature. What they call death and void, we know is breath and voice. In the end, gorgeously endures our enormity. You could believe departed to be the dawn, when the blank night has so long stood, but our bright fled angels will never be fully gone, when they forever are so fiercely good.
Thank you, Sue. Come and learn more about Indivisible and how you can make a difference. There is something for everyone, from writing a postcard to engaging in local protests and everything in between. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you, Debbie.